First at 4, 3 young men are charged as a family struggles with the choice of taking an 11-year-old girl off life support. We'll tell you where the case stands right now. Kim is working on the weekend forecast. Kim.
Well, we squeezed out a little sunshine before a cold front has moved in with some clouds and colder air. So we have a return to winter tomorrow, but then spring-like for next week. We'll talk about it coming up.
All right, Kim, also learning CPR could save the life of someone you love. I've got one couple's dramatic story coming up.
We obviously knew something was terribly wrong. I noticed that Keith's face was starting to turn blue.
What happened in those crucial moments and what's happened since. A story every family should see coming up on First at 4.
Live from downtown Detroit, Local 4 News First at 4 starts now.
Good afternoon, I'm Devin Skillian in for Karen Drew. First at 4, 3 young men have been charged in the shooting of an 11-year-old. Police now say that girl may soon be taken off life support. 3 suspects making their virtual court appearance today. From left to right, that's 19-year-old Nasir Garrett, 20-year-old Robert Turner Jr., and 18-year-old Takari Turner. Robert Turner in the middle, the only one granted bond. He's facing firearms charges and accused of hiding the gun allegedly used in the drive-by shooting on Detroit's east side. The other 2 face a number of charges, including assault with intent to murder. Prosecutors say they fired into a home filled with 9 people at 4 a.m., including the 11-year-old who was sleeping on a couch. They wanted all of them locked up pending trial.
The evidence showed that Mr. Garrett and Mr. Takari Turner did not care who was in that house, how many people were in that house, the ages of the occupants in that house. Their intent was to kill and to do harm. It was not to send a message. That makes them in extreme danger to the community.
A lot of talk about, what the evidence is going to show. We're still at the arraignment. I want to make it clear that each one of these individuals is presumed innocent. These are all allegations.
But in the end, Takari Turner and Nasir Garrett were ordered held without bond. $250,000 cash bond was ordered for Robert Turner Jr. Late today, Police Chief James White says the investigation continues with 2 more suspects in custody and more charges to come. So a lot more to talk about. We'll have a live update coming up on Local 4 News at 5. This week, the city of Detroit reinforcing its emergency medical services, adding a half-dozen new ambulances. With the new additions, the city says it averages more than 40 ambulances a day on the street, and that is the most in the city's history. The new equipment should help with emergency response times, as you might expect. Detroit is currently below the national average at 7 minutes and 33 seconds. That's an improvement because before the city's bankruptcy in 2013, wait times could top 20 minutes. City of Detroit is gearing up for Tuesday's presidential primary, and early voting is underway. And so far, City Clerk Janice Winfrey says voting trends have been similar to previous elections. Areas that already tend to have heavy turnout are seeing more early voters as well. Winfrey says if your precinct number has changed, no need to panic.
The thought is, though, although your precinct number might have changed, where you go and vote does not. So if you vote here at Wayne County Community College, East Campus, and you were precinct 132, you might now be precinct 122, but you still vote here. It's important to us that we don't move the polling location, especially during a presidential election.
Now, Secretary of State says more than 50,000 Michigan voters have used early voting so far. Still the weekend to go. Sunday is the last day of early voting, then the presidential primary. Tuesday, February 27th. You can expect more on election night with a special edition of the 10 p.m. news on Local 4 Plus. We'll have up-to-the-minute results and analysis on what the outcome could mean for the general election in November. Live look now at downtown Detroit as we head into our first forecast. If you're headed out tonight, might feel some gustier winds, maybe even see a few snowflakes flying, which is funny because it started out mild again today. But Kim, start our weekend here.
Well, we did at least get a little bit of a gift because the clouds and the cold front and the colder weather should have been here several hours ago. So it was just kind of a slow moving front. So we did get a chunk of sunshine throughout the day, but now the clouds are here and temperatures will really start falling over the next several hours. It's 50 in Detroit already, down to 42 in Howell, 44 in Pontiac, hanging on to 50 in Adrian. You can really see the cold air. That's that blue there just starting to make its way southward. So temperatures will drop down into to the upper teens to low 20s tonight across Metro Detroit. And you can see 24-hour temp change, how that cold air is again sinking down to the south. Now tomorrow, coldest day we've seen in quite some time. 21 degrees in the morning with wind chills in the single digits, 32 by the afternoon. We'll talk more about some 60-degree weather, a little more pleasant, coming up.
All right, Kim. The United States and U.S. allies have launched a full-court press to put new pressure on Russia over the war in Ukraine and over the mysterious death of opposition leader Alexei Navalny. From the White House to the United Nations, new condemnation for the invasion and for Russian President Putin. Kimberly Gill in the newsroom. Timing of this pressure, no coincidence, Kim.
You're right, Devin, and good afternoon to you. Tomorrow will mark exactly 2 years since Russian troops poured into their neighboring country. Putin hoped for a quick, overwhelming victory. That didn't happen, but Ukraine is facing increasing pressure as the United States Congress hasn't provided new military aid. Today, the Biden administration slapped new sanctions on 500 Russian targets. The U.S. Treasury Department's sanctions prohibit those targeted from accessing any U.S.-based assets using American banks or doing business with any American citizens or companies. The Biden administration is also announcing trade restrictions against 90 entities through the Department of Commerce. Among those targeted are 3 Russian prison officials connected to Navalny. America's ambassador to the United Nations is calling out Russian aggression, and President Biden is pushing Congress to send more help to Ukraine.
The clock is ticking. Brave Ukrainian soldiers and civilians are dying. Russia is taking Ukraine territory for the first time in many months. But here in America, the Speaker gave the House a 2-week vacation. They have to come back. They have to come back and get this done.
Russia has tried to deny Ukrainian identity, to stifle dissent, to rationalize the unconscionable. But we know the truth. We know the truth. This is not a war of liberation. This is not a war of Russian self-defense. This is not a war of last resort. It never has been.
Meanwhile, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is leading a delegation to Ukraine, trying to reassure President Zelensky that Congress will provide more assistance. America's European allies have also levied new sanctions today. However, it's unclear if the new penalties will be any more successful in convincing Russia to stop its aggression. We'll dig a little deeper into the sanctions with new reporting from Washington when you join us for later editions for Local 4 News. For now, Devin, we'll send it back to you. All
right, KG, we'll see you at 5. If you've been following our coverage, you probably know February is American Heart Month. We are focusing a great deal on learning CPR, a life-saving skill. Keith Collette can tell you that. Never a single heart problem or indication of one until he collapsed. And that's when his wife, Britt, went to work.
January 20th, 2019, Keith and Britt Collette were visiting friends.
And this is how the story was told to me, of course, but I'm sitting on the couch. I stand up, I say, I think I'm going to pass out, and I drop back onto the couch.
Yeah, this story comes to Keith secondhand, which is weird because he's at the very center of the story. But just know that if your heart stops, you may not remember it. Now, Britt was an aquatic supervisor, trained for this kind of thing, but when it's so very real, and it's your husband, it's not quite automatic.
She called her dad, who is a captain of Cleveland Fire in Cleveland, Ohio, and he, of course, dealt with that every single day. And so he calmed her down, reminded her of what to do. She started CPR really quickly.
We obviously knew something was terribly wrong. I noticed that Keith's face was starting to turn blue, and then just compressed until the paramedics arrived. I made eye contact with the first one. He said, "I can take over," and I screamed, "Please help him."
You'd like to think that once you get to the hospital, everything is going to be fine, but Keith and Britt were facing some very nasty math. The statistics all pointed toward disaster.
90% of the people who go through that don't live, and of the 10% that do live, only 1% survive with no brain damage. So the outlook was really dire at that point.
Yeah.
And I just remember being like, is Keith ever gonna walk back into this house again? Like, is he ever gonna be here?
He is. every day because all those chest compressions, and no doubt a little luck, put Keith in that smallest percentile.
Your diagnosis at this point is just idiopathic. We have no idea why this happened to you.
3 months of rehab did not come with an answer. The best they could do was implant an internal defibrillator, which was fortunate because it happened a few years later, and no CPR was needed that time. Today, Britt and Keith and their 2 children are a family that is whole. Keith and Britt Collette end up being a different kind of lesson on heart health.
A lot of people can come into this with the idea of, you need to eat healthy, you should exercise more,
Right.
you need to, have an annual physical. Yours is really, you need to be around people who know how to deal with this in an emergency, right?
No, 100%, yeah. Yeah, if my wife wouldn't have known what to do, and she wouldn't have started first aid CPR when she started it, I would not be sitting here with you today.
Yeah. Surviving a near-death experience is a pretty complicated thing, and Keith and Britt have spent a lot of time at their home in Adrian thinking about what their lives should be. Well, part of it is advocating for CPR training. You can learn hands-only CPR on Monday. Our Go For It CPR Lifesavers kicks off at 11 a.m. at the Northwest Activity Center in Detroit. Anyone can attend. You can sign up in advance at clickondetroit.com. You can scan the QR code that you see on the lower right-hand portion of your screen, but walk-ins are welcome as well. It gets underway at 11 a.m. and will go on until 7 p.m. on Monday. We would love to see you there.